Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Off-Farm Income Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us here on our YouTube channel for episode number 896. Well, hey, today we've got kind of a special interview. I had a listener contact me. Justin Farrish out of West Virginia contacted me. And he had quite an interesting story about his family's farm there in West Virginia, his path back to this farm, and how he and his wife and his family are kind of developing it, kind of fixing it back up and getting it back under operation. And it was very interesting to me. I wanted to profile him and their journey, what they're doing here on the show. And so we're going to be featuring Justin today. He's talking to us from a field out in West Virginia where he's doing his day job. And we're going to explore what he wants to do with this farm, some of the history of it, and some of the interesting history and the hard work that his great-grandfather did when he first started this farm back in the early 20th century. I think you're going to enjoy it. We're going to get it started for you right now. Well, Justin, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure.
You bet. Hey, I cannot thank you enough for being a listener to the show and for reaching out, and I'm excited to talk to you. I have been... So 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, I did an East Coast trip. I started off in Washington, D.C. and met with the National Farm Bureau and went all the way up to Connecticut and went to Farm Aid and had a media pass for all of that. And on the way, I had never set foot in West Virginia. So I went just outside of Loudoun County, Virginia, and on my way north, I went into that just the very eastern tip of West Virginia, kind of where those three rivers come together. I'm forgetting all my geography. And saw it. It's beautiful there. Absolutely beautiful.
It is. It's a remarkable place. It's an old culture, but it is very, very beautiful.
Yeah, and we're doing this, if anybody's watching this on video, where you're standing right now also looks like a very beautiful spot.
This is kind of a unique place for southern West Virginia because it's such a big valley bottom. This actually is not my farm. I am doing a project, so I'm here working. But this is kind of unique. This is a big, wide valley bottom, so very different.
Okay. Well, you've got a really interesting story. You sent me a bunch of history, and I'm fascinated by it, and I want to jump into it. Let's start off just talking about you and your direct family. So tell us about you.
Well, me personally, I am 35. I was born in West Virginia, raised in North Carolina. My family moved when I was pretty young to North Carolina, and we always had, the family farm. My grandfather, he lived there when I was young, and I would come stay with him in the summer. And just become obsessed with it. It turned into a dream. And boy, of all the dreams to pick, I could have picked something much easier. I finally moved back up here when I was 18 and stayed a little while and went back to North Carolina, went to school. And then my wife and I and our two very young children moved here, and we've been here since 13 years, I guess. So, we made a go at it. We're still making a go at the farm.
Very cool. Where in North Carolina were you?
We were the Lake Norman area, about 30 miles north of Charlotte.
Okay, 30 miles north of Charlotte. That kind of gives me a frame of reference. And then where you're at now and where your farm is at now, you said that's in southern West Virginia. Is that right?
Yeah, it's in southern West Virginia. It's probably 40 miles from the Virginia line.
Okay. And what's the nearest large town or city that I would have heard of?
Beckley, West Virginia would probably be the biggest.
All right, I said that I had heard of.
Well, Charleston is the capital. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's about it in West Virginia. Yeah, very cool, man. It is so pretty back there. I always say on the show that when I talk to somebody from Virginia, Virginia's always in my top 3 list of places that I'd love to farm. But I have, that trip I did, just what the limited part of West Virginia that I saw was so beautiful. I feel like from my perspective, living out in Idaho, that West Virginia is kind of a hidden gem. Do you feel that way, or has it been discovered?
No, I think it's like I said, it's an old culture, so I think it certainly is a hidden gem. But I think that it is being discovered. I mean, where I live very, very remote,
Mm-hmm.
and I see people. They come through and they stop and they're like, "Do you live here?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And we'll talk. I'm like, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Well, we're from Atlanta. We're looking for property, so
Ah,
it's coming."
okay. Yeah, we got the same thing going on in Idaho. No question about that. Okay, well, tell me the history of this farm. You wrote it to me, but I'd love you to tell our audience. It's really fascinating.
Well, my great grandfather, um, he was born around 1900, and he lived in a small cabin with many, many brothers and sisters uh, in the valley, in the creek, in the holler, as we call it.
Uh-huh.
And in I guess before the Depression, things started kind of getting rough. 1925, he started buying pieces of property,
Okay.
and he just started putting it together as he could. And some of the pieces he got for taxes. And it was very remote, rough, rugged country. It was up on top of the mountain, um, but they were from there. They loved it, and they farmed it. They cleared the trees. They sawed lumber, sold lumber. He was gone for extended periods of time, trying to find work way off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just did whatever they had to do to make it. So the kids and his wife, they really stepped in and took care of things on the farm and they made it happen. And he actually cleared most of that. Well, the farm itself altogether is about 350 acres.
Okay.
The farmable part is 40 acres. Um, and there's actually more that could be farmed. That's one of my goals, is to clear off some more land
Mm-hmm.
in the future. But he did it. He did that 40 acres by hand, and
Wow.
it's just amazing. I mean, if you've dug a small stump out of the ground, you know,
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I read that part in your story, and that blew my mind. So every time I go back to the east, because I've grown up in the west, and unless we irrigate it, or it's a river bottom, or it's the mountains, we don't have any trees. It's flat. It's either grass, it's sagebrush, whatever. And so every time I go back to the east and I see these farms that are built, and where they're not farming, it is surrounded by trees. You just can't stop the trees. They just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And I wonder, how do people get that done? But you're saying that your grandfather or great-grandfather did this by hand. He dug out those roots, cut down those trees, milled the lumber, did all of that by hand back in the 1920s.
Yeah, from the 20s probably to the 50s, he did it by hand. And they used horses.
Mm-hmm.
Dynamite was on hand. Anybody could dynamite. You could just go get that at
Okay.
your local Dollar General, if you will. It was just on hand. So they did a lot of blasting, but it was still a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
It just amazed me.
Yeah, it blows my mind to think about clearing those fields so you can cultivate them and getting all those roots out and all of that. That's amazing to me. And so,
The thing about West Virginia is, and I told you in what I wrote you, for every blade of grass, we have 3 or 4 rocks.
that's a whole,
And truly, that's a true statement.
that is a whole nother challenge. Now, I understand the rocks. I live over a lava bed, so I understand the rocks out here in Idaho. But yeah, you being on a mountainside and having all that erosion coming down, you've got tons of rock.
Sure.
Okay, so great-grandfather started it, and then the farm passed to your grandfather, is that correct?
It passed to my grandfather
Okay.
in the late 80s, and he really changed what the farm was about. It went from like an old-timey farm, rough pasture that never got mowed,
Mm-hmm.
a few cows. He turned it into something more like what it is today. He bought some more modern equipment, and at that time, square bales. They put up square bales.
Mm-hmm.
They sold hay. He raised cattle. He raised some horses. So yeah, he had that, and he did well with it until he passed away.
Okay.
and he passed it to my mother, which my mother currently has it.
Okay.
Yep.
So it went to your mom, and then she's allowing you and your wife to kind of get it back into production and to farm it?
Yeah. She allowed us to move in, and of course we have our agreements, and the plan is that it is to be passed to me. But the things happen, things come up, but that is the plan for sure. But when we moved up there, the house was old, it was rough, it was terrible. So we spent a small fortune and a great deal of time, and still spending time remodeling and tearing down things and rebuilding. And I mean, fence lines and, you name it. If it has to do with the farm, the barns, the ponds, just every detail had to be fixed. So it's a tremendous amount of work.
Now, I'm thinking back to the way you described the farm when your great-grandfather had it. So 350 acres, about 40 acres of grass, so that leaves 310 acres of woods and hills and mountains and all of that. And you talked about just the old way of doing things. Was the farm itself for your grandfather and for your great-grandfather or your great-grandmother, was it mostly like subsistence? Meaning we can get our own food off of this place, but we're not really producing livestock or anything like that for sale? How did it work in their day?
Well, it worked very much like that. They had goats. They raised a lot of goats and ate goat meat and drank goat milk. A few hogs and some crops, a couple cows, maybe one to eat and a couple to breed. And it was very, very simple.
Okay. So it was a matter of producing food to feed the family, not necessarily an operation to sell livestock to other people. I mean, that probably happened from time to time when things were going well, but that was not the intention.
That was not the intention.
Interesting. Now, you talked about in the history you sent me that your great-grandfather, he was making money. I'm trying to find it in here, but was he selling lumber, or did he just use the lumber off the place to build what he needed?
No. Like you said, you're from the West, and I've been out West, and it's a different place, but we have so many trees. And he sold lumber, and the entire farm was pretty much trees, and they cut them and they sold them to neighbors, to wherever they could sell them to. So he did do very well with that. He made money at that.
Got it. And he milled them himself, so did he must have put in a mill or something?
Yeah, he did. He had a pretty good sized mill. It was actually a frick, and parts and pieces of it are actually in the bushes on some of the edges of the fields.
Okay.
So it's actually pretty neat.
Okay. What is a frick? I've never heard that.
Well, that's just the manufacturer name.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I love embarrassing myself on my own show. Okay. So, okay. So he was milling lumber, and then it went to. Did you say it went to your grandfather in the 80s or your dad in the 80s? I'm trying to remember.
Yes. It went to his son, my grandfather.
Okay, to your grandfather. And then you said he kind of brought it into more modern production. So that's when he started haying it and putting up hay.
Yep. He bought a newer tractor and some square bell equipment, and he started cutting hay and selling hay, and he had several horses and cattle that he sold strictly for money.
Okay.
And that's it's kind of it was a different era for sure.
Okay. And was that all he did, or did he work off of the farm?
He had a pretty interesting story. He was retired by then. He retired from the Alaskan pipeline.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he made his money, and he was back home at a pretty young age. So he had many, many years on the farm.
Got it. So he went off. That's really interesting. And I hope you were prepared for this history lesson for everybody, but I'm fascinated by it because we're always looking for a way for people to be able to farm and to achieve that lifestyle where they can stay on the farm. So your grandfather, he went off. He found a job that would pay him enough money that he could work at it for a certain number of years, whatever that was, and then come back and then live the lifestyle he was after there in West Virginia.
That is absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a great method, and it's hard for people to put stuff off. People want to be in that lifestyle now, and it drives them crazy if they're working a job and maybe they're in the city or something like that. But man, if you can scrap and you can save, you can make this happen. There's a lot of places in the country it could work out.
And I mean, that's what I've had to do, honestly, Matt. I mean, I do live there, and I have gotten the cart before the horse, so to speak, in some situations, but you have to have the money to do it. And it took a lot of years to piece things together. And, we had junky equipment in the beginning, and we fought it and still do some, but our head is definitely above water, and yeah, you have to have the money, I guess, before you get started.
Well, I mean, there's multiple different ways to go about it, but that is one method, right? If you can build up a pile of cash, that can get you rolling, and it can keep you on the farm. The other way is, like I talk about, I use entrepreneurship. Another way is to work and take a job off the farm and to build it up on the side. And they've all kind of got their different pros, and they've all got their different cons. And there's no one absolute right answer, but it's interesting to look at how other people have done it. Okay, so tell us about you today. So you're working off the farm, is that right?
I am. Today I am off the farm. I'm 25 miles from home, and this is, like I said, a beautiful farm. And I'm standing in a field that they are actually doing second cutting, and it's on down below me. You can't see it, but this grass is probably a foot and a half tall. Wonderful second cutting. And the project here with my work is actually a stream mitigation. This particular farmer, he sold the rights to an individual to do stream restoration through this property.
Okay.
And he still has his farm. He has a little bit less farm, but I don't know if you can tell, but there's some brush in the background and willow trees. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there's a stream in there, and it's a 10-year project, and we reconstructed the stream, and we do monitoring on it, and it paid him very well. And he still has the farm. Like I said, he just has a little bit less. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty interesting. That's what I am doing today, is I am doing some stream monitoring.
So what is your full-time job?
I am a land surveyor.
Okay. Very interesting. And is that what you were doing and went to school for in North Carolina?
It is. I came up here doing that, and everyone always warned me. They said the surveying in the mountains is going to be brutal. You're not going to love it, but it's just part of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm kind of a Revolutionary War enthusiast, and so I read quite a bit about that, and I read about all the different land surveying that was being done, on the frontier back during that area, which where you're standing would have been the frontier back then. And then also read about land surveying that was being done in Texas when Texas was trying to move west. And that was a dangerous job, particularly in Texas. The Comanches did not like land surveyors because they opened up land for people to come and move into and develop. But that is rugged, hard work.
It is.
Very interesting. So you were able to go back to where the farm is. There's enough work in your field to keep you employed there, living remotely in West Virginia.
There is. West Virginia is kind of a tough culture. Sometimes you may have to travel a few hours to work, but there certainly is enough work just in the state to stay here and stay busy.
Okay, very cool. And with this type of job, do you have some flexibility? Are you able to kind of is it the type of job, I should say, they call it a results-oriented work environment, which is basically, look, we need you to do X, and you can kind of do X when you need to do X. Is it that type of job?
It is. It's It can be very much so. Today and this week is one of those. It's one of those days and weeks. Yeah, we have a certain deadline. If I get it done, I can go home and go farm. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so it's interesting. What are your plans for the family farm? What do you want this to develop into?
Well, the past couple of years I've been working on nutrients for the ground, and I really want that to develop. It takes some time. It takes some money, but I'm really it's coming together, and I want that to get better. And I've got a large wooded area. It's about 30 acres. I actually want to have that timber cut off of it and get rid of it, and I want to turn it into field.
Okay.
For grazing purposes, for hay purposes. Out west where you are, I've been out to Illinois. That's the furthest I've been out west, and some of those fields are just unbelievable.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm in awe when I go out there of just how big. Well, a field here might be on a ridge top, or it might be in a valley bottom. And I have some fields that are 2.5 or 3 acres, and a lot of people might say, well, that's not a field at all, but that's West Virginia for you,
I'm sorry.
Well, Go ahead.
Oh, I just can't get the smile off my face when you say, I've been out west, I've been to Illinois. And I'm sitting here in Idaho where we've got rangeland where we've got ranchers who are running cattle, and they can run a pair on about 100 acres. That's what they can do, is one pair of cattle. It takes 100 acres to support them. So when you say Illinois is the West, it makes me laugh. It makes me smile. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, that's as far as I have personally been.
I know.
But yeah, I think the biggest field that I have is 11 acres. And to be able to get that 30 acres would be almost half of what we're doing now. It'd be remarkable.
Yeah.
And it certainly is, it's going to take a while. I always tell people I'm on a 50-year plan.
Yeah.
If I can get it done in the next 50 years, I am satisfied.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a lifestyle, right? It's not a hit. It's not a quick hit then sell. This is a lifestyle we're planning out, and so 50 years is that's a pretty conservative plan. There's a lot of these old farmers out there that are on about an 80-year plan, right?
Well, I think I've got 50 left in me, So
I hear you. So, is there more land that you could clear, or is that 30 acres? Is that it? And then after that, there's just not any more available area that you could turn into hay meadows or grazing?
No, there certainly is. But that I have my eye on that because it's very flat and it would produce very well. But no, there's certainly, another, I don't know, 10 to 15 acres that would be, very easy to farm.
Gotcha. And then what do you do? I mean, when you've got so much land that is in hillsides and mountains and woods, is there production capability there, or do you just have that for the elbow room and the scenery and the hunting and stuff like that?
I would say that there's not a lot of production in the hillside because it dries out so quickly. You may be able to graze that with animals one time.
Okay.
And it's just not really going to produce. It's not going to sustain a group of animals. You couldn't count on it. So, I think I've seen people try it, and they do it once, maybe twice in a year if we have a good year. But
okay.
I would rather have the beauty in the hunting you mentioned. I would rather have that elbow room.
Okay, gotcha. So the people who are trying that, they're clearing the hillsides as well and seeing what they can grow for forage.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, do you run your fences just there in the bottom, or are you fencing the entire perimeter of the property, even up in the trees and stuff like that?
We have fenced some perimeter, but I try to. It's very expensive, as you well know.
Well, so what's the long-term plan? I know you're getting started with your cattle herd, and so cattle are on on the horizon. And let's see, you bought your first cows in 2018. Is that correct?
Yeah. We actually really wanted to get some cattle in 2017, and had some things happen, and we weren't able to do it. And finally found the resources to pull it together at the very end of 2017, early 2018, and ended up buying 8 cows, 8 registered Black Angus off of a fella that he really spent his life developing this herd, the genetics and whatnot. So pretty lucky. I really feel like they were meant for me. But he had bad health issues.
Okay.
And he had to sell them. And I bought 8 of them. And they stepped off the trailer. And I'm thinking around the end of March of 2018.
Okay.
And we've had them since. Still have that 8 cows, and they've produced calves every year. And we've done some AI work, and we now have 4 more that we've added to the herd this year. They were first calf heifers.
Okay.
So we were excited about that. They all produced and produced well.
That's great.
We've done pretty well with it, and pretty excited about it.
That is great. Well, congratulations on getting started. I know the feeling. So that is wonderful to want to do it for so long, and then to finally watch those cows go out and graze. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so long-term plans. Is a long-term plans cattle and hay? Is there more livestock involved in the way you see this farm developing? Tell me about that.
No, long-term plans is cattle and hay. I have piddled with almost everything, and it just doesn't work for me. Not that it won't work for anyone else, but I've raised hogs, butchering hogs, and sold to private individuals, and the amount of work was unreal to raise those hogs. Okay. And I just really the time versus the profit. It wasn't there for me personally.
Sure.
So and I've sold hay strictly to individuals, and there's just not money in it. There's not money in it enough for me, and the way we are set up. So I think cattle and hay is by far the route that I want to go.
Gotcha. And do you have a time of year in West Virginia, the area you're at where you have to feed, where you run out of feed on the ground?
Yes, it's anywhere from November to March, April. It's just every year is so different.
Okay, so that's really similar to me as well. Okay, very interesting. And so how many cattle do you envision you being able to support on this farm? And do you even want to get as big as you possibly could?
Oh, absolutely. I do. I want to stretch it like the weather's going to be perfect every year.
Okay. And so when that, when you're kind of envisioning that, how many head of cattle do you think that'll be?
Probably, honestly, 40 would be pretty comfortable, but maybe 50.
40 to 50 head. Okay. And then is your business model with the cattle, is it going to be selling calves every fall, or are you going to be finishing and direct marketing cattle? What do you have in mind there?
For now, it's selling calves in the fall.
Okay.
We have saved some of our bulls and raised them, 16, 18 months, and then sell them to people that are interested in a bull for their herd.
Okay.
And that's a pretty good game right there. I like that. It's not the worst, to keep them over another year or whatever.
Yeah, very interesting.
But in the future, I don't know. I could see if I could have 50, I would finish 50.
Yeah.
For future endeavors.
Gotcha. Okay, now you're getting started. You're doing the land surveying. What's the vision? You're 35 years old. Are you trying to reach a point where farming is all you do, or do you plan on having the job off of the farm until you reach, whatever that retirement date would be for somebody who wasn't involved in agriculture?
I don't know. I want the extra income at this moment because I have two children. One will be 15 next year, and one is 12 now. So they are interested in college. I want them to go to college, and right now the extra income is it's college money.
Okay.
And of course, I want to keep the place up too. I want to pass it to them, but I don't know. I really can't answer that question about the future. I would love if I could get myself in a situation financially to one day just set back and let the farm take care of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we have several years of college that we have to get through before we're there.
Yeah, that stuff, that doesn't cost very much though, right? College, super cheap.
It should be a breeze.
Yeah, it'll be a breeze. Yeah, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, so I understand completely. Okay, so you are the fourth generation to be on this piece of ground, to farm this piece of ground, starting with your great-grandfather. I want to ask you about that because there's so many different ways to get started, and in your case, here you've got this piece of ground that can be passed to you, and it's been in the family, but because it's already predetermined, that means you have to go to this particular piece of ground. You've got to take what's available to you to make your income, to make your off-farm income in that area or within some sort of reasonable driving distance to that area. That creates its own challenges. But I want to ask you about the pressure. Do you feel pressure if the farm is ultimately passed to you? Do you feel any pressure like we've got to keep this going? I want to be able to pass it along and keep it in the family. Is there pressure there, or if it left the family, would that be not a big deal?
That's pretty interesting. That's something that I think about, and it's not even mine yet. Personally, I watch my children's behavior. I listen to what they say, what they do, what they want. I try to envision the future, and you just wonder to myself, not making any plans, but just wonder to myself when the day comes, what's going to be the answer? Sure. Where does it go? I watched my mom struggle with it. There's certainly a lot of history and bad blood with the passing of it to my grandfather from my great-grandfather.
Oh, there's
a lot of bad. Yes. And I watched that, or I was very young, but I know the story. So, I don't know. I think that whichever way it goes, you just have to hope that it goes the right way so that it can be sustained in farming.
Yeah. So when it went to your grandfather, did he have siblings that wanted it and thought they should get it or something like that?
Yes. He had 4 brothers and 2 sisters, which some of them had already passed, but every cousin come out of the woodwork, and cousins. I still have cousins that try to catch me and say things, and it just is what it is. It's history.
That is interesting. Well,
things happen for a reason, Matt.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. Well, I won't dive too much into the personal stuff, but that is interesting, though. You think about brothers and sisters, and so was your grandfather? Was he the oldest brother?
No, he was actually the baby of the brothers. There's actually one more sibling that is younger.
Okay.
But of all the brothers, he was the baby.
So a break with tradition a little bit, in that for so many generations, the farm always went to the oldest son. But you're talking the 1980s, so things have changed by then, obviously. And but for cousins to be jumping in and saying they should have a right to it, that's interesting. That's not something you hear as often as you do with siblings. But it's unfortunate when that can cause a rift in the family, but it is what it is. What can you do about it, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, it sounds great, and I'd love to see you guys get it developed. So, are you living in the house now? I know you said you had a ton of remodeling and things like that to do.
Yes, yes. We spent several years remodeling the house. The house was built by another family um, before my great grandparents moved in, so
Hmm.
it's been around a long time, and it's the framing and a lot of that structural stuff is original, but
Hmm.
I remodeled it. It's just state of the art. It's very, very nice. It actually kind of doesn't fit the culture, but we're very comfortable there,
Okay.
very happy there. We're getting ready to put in a pool and a nice big deck around it. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, I don't know what my great grandpa would think about that.
Well, if he lived through the Depression, he wouldn't think much of it. And I only know that because I had the same great grandfather and or grandfather and my stepfather, both from Oklahoma in the Depression. And yeah, they didn't think much of splurges on yourself, but that's okay. Times have changed.
Right.
That is great. Well, that is wonderful. I loved hearing about it, and so glad that you reached out. I wanted to end on one thing. You said at the very outset of the interview that it has become an obsession, and I'd love to have you expand on that. What do you when you describe fixing up this farm and wanting to farm this ground, and you describe it as an obsession? Can you explain to us what you mean by that?
That's a tough one. I can try. I guess it's an obsession because it drives me. It wakes me up. It makes me go to bed early. Every thought that I have, the farm is always in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Future plans. I'm always thinking, scheming, planning. I see something out for sale, and I might be 20 years out from needing something like that, or 10 years, or just what. And I'm gonna go talk to them. I gotta go see what's going on, see if I can buy that. And it drives my wife crazy. Um, but just I don't want it to fail. I don't want to fail
Mm-hmm.
and disappoint those that were before me. So it's just I don't know, love, obsession. I don't know. Obsession may have not been the right word, but it's certainly drives me
Mm-hmm.
every every day.
So I am very similar to you. I've got a lot of people that I cherish in my life that I really value who have passed on, but they're the people that came before me, and they're gone. And I guess it depends on your beliefs and how it all works. But I don't want to let them down. I don't want to disappoint them, and they're not even here anymore. So I don't know if you and I think the right way, but that is the way I think too. And for better or for worse, it's made me a better person and helped me accomplish things in my life. So maybe that's the value of it, I suppose. What is it about?
Well, and
Go on.
I can hear it when I listen to your other guests. I mean, I said it before we got disconnected. Listening to the young men and women that you interview, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can hear it in them. They are driven, dedicated people, and of course, they're young. And I'm young, but they're figuring it out, and
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're a step ahead because of the lifestyle that they're in.
Well, yeah, that's a very astute point, and I agree completely. I think that we're seeing so much. Well, just actually today's episode that just came out. So we're doing this recording on Tuesday, the 15th of September. Today's episode that just came out, I did a little bit of a rant about consumerism and materialism and stuff like that. And the reason I did that rant is because I get to speak to so many people like yourself and so many of these students in FFA and things like that, and their focus in life are on these. It's on lifestyle, and it's on how they get to live and how they get to contribute to the world through agriculture, through whatever that may be, and it's not on stuff. And so I do think they have a head start in that way because if you value living rural and living agricultural, it makes your life so much simpler, less complicated, and more accessible. Because if you want to live out there and you don't want to be in the city dealing with buying stuff and showing everybody how cool you are, then it becomes much more affordable and a much more easier way of life, at least in my opinion. But it sounds like you've experienced that yourself.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Well, last question. What is it about agriculture and farming that you love?
The work ethic, the old-fashioned feel that it has to it. I watch my grandpa sell cows and haul cows, and it just seemed like it was the most prestigious thing to do, in my opinion, of all the things, and I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing for me.
Well, I completely understand. I feel like you and I are kindred spirits in that. I don't know. I like the old ways of doing things and that lifestyle, and I feel like about 30 years ago we should have hit timeout and just stopped right there and just left it there. But we kept advancing. I just want to kind of stay back there, 30 years ago or so. So I completely understand, Justin. Hey, thank you so much for reaching out and sharing a little bit about your farm dream and what you're doing to get it developed and to make it happen for you. I really appreciate it.
Well, it was my honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us, everybody, and thank you to Justin Farrish for reaching out and for being willing to come on the show. That was great. As always, we would love it if you would let us know what you think we should be doing for any guest suggestions, any episode topics, and just reach right out, matt@offincome.com. I'd be happy to correspond with you. And hey, as always, enjoy your journey to the ultimate lifestyle business, agriculture.